This Manhwa starts off in the beautiful capital of the Apollodina Empire. The sun shines bright in the sky as aristocrats gather and discuss a rumor. The noble ladies sit amongst themselves with the men chiming in. Yet the rumors mostly orbited one woman and one woman alone. Rosalina Edris Peldon. With her title as the Grand Duchess of the Empire as well as being the only sister of the current reigning emperor. It was absolutely no wonder to anyone that she would be the talk of the town. With her wild and eccentric personality as fiery as her hair, she garnered a bad reputation amongst high and noble society. Whilst other noble ladies in even lesser positions than herself preferred hobbies such as tea parties, balls, and dress shopping, she was more likely to spend her time fencing against knights in battles to the death. She was indeed a mysterious princess as the rumors described her to be. In fact, somewhere along the line, she took up wearing trousers and buttoned blouses as opposed to gowns and flowing skirts. Always, she kept a sword by her side. The rumors which had spread like wildfire concerned the nature of the slave that the Duchess had kept. More specifically, the relationship between the Duchess and her slave. The rumors circulated that the Duchess had kept a wild beast slave as her lover. Naturally, everyone looked at the strange Duchess with disgust and shock. They all had the same thoughts in mind. To have a wild beast boy warm one's bed at night is truly despicable. Far too much for even the strange Duchess. Yet the Duchess failed to deny the rumors, giving more reason for the rumors to grow.
The conversation was interrupted by a loud clap. A man notified the busybody guests that the Duchess's birthday was upcoming, therefore whoever started and instigated these rumors will receive punishment. Daring anyone to continue their gossip. An ensuing ball where wine-filled glasses clinked, at the birthday celebration of the Princess of the Empire. When suddenly, the arrival of the Grand Duchess left everyone in awe. Although she was reputed for her services in combat and swordsmanship, dedicating her reputation as a lady to battle. Her beauty was evident to all that bestowed their eyes on her face. Her entrance to the ballroom as poised and elegant as what is expected of her title. All the guests marveled in or at her appeal. Her pearls. Her complimentary dress. Then the whispers shifted to her companion. Attention drawn to the even more mysterious man. No one here had seen his face before. This made nobles think he could be the slave owner of the rumors. Naturally, the man's heightened hearing made him sensitive to the rumors, as he heard people mock the Duchess for her lover and for having a slave owner. The man was clearly displeased, though the Duchess was accustomed to the rumors and whispers. He asked her not to smile, though she remarked she could think of whatever she pleased, expressing her disinterested in the rumors anyway. Both the mystery man and the Duchess grew tired of the hostile environment. The Duchess decided to go about her business patting his blue cloak. She told him to wait, as she greeted His Majesty. He was noticeably unhappy. She planned to leave him alone knowing his dislike to such environments. So smiling she offered him the option of going with her to the Emperor. This was an obvious no-go to the man, so he left to the balcony away from the rumors of the people inside. He closed the curtain to prevent any more noisy talkings. Promising to return quickly, she left. Staring at the scenery from the balcony, he reflected on how his expectation on the rumors and disgust shown towards his presence were exceeded by the nobles. Breathing in the fresh air, he gazed around the park and remembered his talk with Rosalind yesterday. At the time, Rosalind hovered above the half-naked man, cornering him. She began to remark on something as he pondered on the beauty of her face. She edged her face closer towards him. She stopped speaking as they gazed into each other's eyes. Flashing back to the present day, he held his bruised collar, remarking to himself how his lover can be more of a savage than him at times.
A girl who had been peeking at the strange man from behind asked, "What is he doing?" He covered his collarbone with his arm in shock. She repeated her question, referring to the drink he was holding. She asked whether alcohol was in his glass or a non-alcoholic drink. She asked for a taste, to which he reused and told her to ask for something else instead. The girl made a cute face, so he gave her a much smaller portion. And when she wanted to respond, she was interrupted by a maid. The maid said the girl could not drink what a stranger gave her, calling her Your Highness. The man was obviously unaware of the royal origins of the girl, watching the scene awkwardly. The girl told the maid she thought the drink was not based since a prince from a distant land was drinking it. The labeling of the handsome man as a prince left the man speechless. He wanted to say something, but the maid left with the girl without any such explanation. Looking from the maid's shoulder, the girl said goodbye. Now the rumors shifted that Rosalind appeared with a prince from a distant land. Understanding this would only cause for more misunderstandings. He face-palmed his forehead. Rosalind entered, asking if he liked her niece. He told her that the girl mistook him for a prince, to which Rosalind informed him he was a prince who escaped from a distant land due to false accusation at a time of struggle for the throne. Hence how he made his way to the empire to flee from Perses. So Rosalind acts as his ally. To that end, if her identity is revealed, the empire's interference will be known to all.
She will fight in disguise. The man looked at her unhappily and asked when she had made up that story. The girl called him down, saying that he didn't have to worry, and then she moved closer and hugged him, resting her forehead against his chest. She said her niece quite bright, and she didn't believe he was a real prince. She'd just like to fantasize about it, but Fendler was disturbed by something else. He was worried that if the girl found out he was a slave, she would be uncomfortable, and Rosalie merely replied that Melody, for that was the princess's name, was similar in character to her, and so she would not be displeased. And afterward, taking him by the elbow, trying to cheer him up, she reminded him that he wasn't originally a slave, pulling him to her and wrapping her arms around the man's strong neck. Rosalind kissed Fendler. He clearly hadn't expected this and didn't know how to react. Fendler awkwardly informed her that it was not a good idea to act like that in front of people, but Rosalind replied that they were only watching because they were jealous, and after pulling the man to her, she gazed into his eyes and admired his beauty. That answer seemed to comfort him, so he smiled slightly. Even happier, when the girl announced that she had said hello to the emperor and congratulated the princess so they could go home, the girl reached out and touched his cheek. Then the boy intercepted her palm and pressed himself more confidently against her. He admitted to himself that he loved it, which he talked about their home together. Back in her mansion, she touched the beautiful and nobly reclining cougar. Then apologized afterwards. When she noticed that her touch it caused Fendler to wake up after scratching his neck, she told him to lie down and keep sleeping. Afterward, she lay down next to him, covering herself with a blanket, but suddenly a strong male hand lay on the blanket beside her. The man who had taken on human form again scrutinized her face, every muscle in his body. He was tense, hovering a couple of centimeters above her. He gently pulled her face to his and kissed her. Afterward, he began stroking her velvety skin. The girl hugged him tenderly and pulled into her, causing him to lose his balance and lie on top of her. But the girl didn't seem to care at all when she was very quietly in his ear that they should cuddle tonight. He took it grudgingly, but didn't argue with his arms around her. He fell asleep. The girl put her hand on his back. Saw a few scars, and then she admitted to herself when she saw his scars first. She remembered the first meeting was a long time ago. There's a place in the capital empire called Green Manor. It looks like a place from an ancient castle from a fairy tale and rises majestically as a scenic view. It has the noblest, longest history out of all the imperial family mansions. Though few have stayed, no one has lived in it for their whole life, this place known only to the emperor. It had long belonged only to the emperor, but the only owner now was Rosalind, the Duchess herself. Looking tired, the maid asked how Rosalind felt. She reported she had a minor headache, but she did not need the doctor's help. She was brought out her thoughts about the cause of her headache by her butler, who told her that my lady alone was requesting audience with her mother, also said that she had sent her. However, he did not expect her show on the same day. The Duchess was not pleased but still has to be let into the drawing room. When she came into the room, by Lady Aline was already seated. Sipping tea, she jumped out cheerfully and hugged Rosalind. She was glad to see her, as she asked the servants to bring the gift she had brought with her as soon as possible. Rosalind's mood took a sharp turn for the worse when she saw the huge steel cage had been placed on the carpet. At first she didn't understand and asked if she wanted to give her an iron box, but the girl reported that she couldn't sleep for days after her new acquisition, as she couldn't wait to give it to Rosalie. Aline reported that as soon as she saw it at the auction at the same moment, she thought of the Duchess. Then Aline asked to open the drawer. The iron locks that closed it came off and then the door opened. The protagonist was horrified to find that inside the iron box sat a little boy with ears and a tail. Rosalind asked with horror, had the girl decided to give her a slave, easing again at the life-eating little fellow. She was silent. Then Aline, alone trying to fill the silence, explained that she had seen it by chance at the auction and could not pass it by. In addition, she remembered that there were no slaves in Rosalind's house. She said that if this boy could be tamed, he could stand up to 3 ordinary knights, so he was well suited for the role of a bodyguard. Looking at the boy, she asked her sarcastically, "What kind of bodyguard is he?" "He's so young." The girl hid her smile behind her fan and said that they were growing up fast, for in 2 years he would be young boy. Then leading closer, she whispered conspiratorially that adults could not be, because slaves could only be taken when they were children. Otherwise, if you not tame it, it cannot be used as a subordinate in the future. Because an adult slave who does not love his master will not serve faithfully, he will only follow his partner. So people who want to use a slave take their mothers still young, and the easiest way to tame them is with mind-altering drugs. The girl watched with horror the guy bound hand and foot, who even had his eyes blindfolded with cloth, and was horrified. Rosalind was about to refuse, but Aline interrupted her and quickly said goodbye and that she had some urgent business to attend to, then turned and left. Rosalind was still watching the girl as she left. When she had asked what he should do with the boy, she sat down in her chair, tired. Liane noted that although the sale and purchase of slaves was not illegal in the Empire, it did not mean that it was right. She asked the maid to bring wine and watched the boy in silence, after which he began to ponder that she didn't even slave. But she wasn't going to send him anywhere in such a deplorable state anyway. The butler, looking at the prisoner, asked Rosalind what her order to be done to him was. The Duchess said he should wash it and put it on the bed, and probably throw away the iron box in which it had been slithered, after which, lastly, she asked him to summon Nora. Some time passed. Rosalind sat and communicated with Eleanor. She reported that she had done everything necessary. She warned that the boys would take 2 or 3 days to heal. The girl looked at his deep wounds with surprise and asked again, but Eleanor only explained that slaves recovered. And the scars remain, because the same place had been scared and cut hundreds of times. Rosalind's interlocutor was Eleanor Greenwood, who, though from an aristocratic family, was still one of the few, had been educated at the academy. Now she had become a doctor, caring for slaves. Thanking the woman for responding and coming to help, she asked what medicine she had given him. After all, he had not woken up for quite some time, the girl looking down, and happily so, that she had never dealt with, so she couldn't have done it alone. She then shared with Eleanor that she was going to send him back right away, but then she changed her mind, because if she sent him back, he would become a slave again. It would be treated even worse than before. So she preferred to cure him, and when he was well enough, she would let him go. Eleanor inquired where she was going to let him go, but Rosalind explained that surely the boy must have lived somewhere before, and that there was a place he wanted to go to. Ree delivers direct answer, who explained that there might not be such a place, because if they caught a slave it meant his home had been taken, and returning to the same place was still a voluntary surrender to the slave traders. Eleanor explained that in any case, whatever the case, as soon as the boy's on the street he will be caught again and sent into slavery. The girl asked Element for advice for she could not leave the boy at home. Eleanor asked why she could not leave him. Rosalind that explained as a prisoner. But the boy was young enough, and she was not old enough to replace his parents, and it would be worse for him. Stopping Rosalind's train of thought, Eleanor said that she understood her thoughts, but she was mistaken after all. But boy was not a child at all. Even though he looked like a boy, he was at least 20 years old. Looking at the boy, who was sleeping soundly under the influence of the medicine, she thought deeply. The girl interjected. Then Eleanor explained that when he met a partner and became an adult, he would most likely look like a normal person, that he could go outside without the risk of being caught again. The girl asked him to explain how he could take on a fully human appearance. After all, prisoners, regardless of their age, have ears, tails, or anything that belong to animals or some physiological features that ordinary people don't have. Eleanor reported that this was true, but there were exceptions, and in this case this boy belonged to the VE. It was so small that even she didn't have enough information about them, and it is even rarer to find such representatives with darker skin tones. She assumed it was likely that most leg owners thought his skin was a mutation, which was why he hadn't been sold until now, Rosalie remembered. Their lawn had talked about this guy as someone special. Eleanor angrily said that when girls see something unusual or rare, her eyes immediately light up. No matter how much money it costs, she is ready to give any money to get this thing. And afterwards she still angrily finished that. In any case, you should not let the boy go now, because afterwards she would worry about herself. The girl tried to deny it, but Eleanor rightly pointed out that she didn't care about the guy. She would have kicked him out as soon as she got him, so she's only pretending to be so cold-blooded outside. Rosalind said goodbye to the doctor. Nora said she couldn't stay as she had to go to the patient tomorrow morning, and promised that she would try to find people who take care of the boy's life. She sadly informed him that if she could, she would take him in with her, but she no longer had room. Then Rosalind sensibly remarked that she had once offered her a new home, but she had refused Eleanor getting into her carriage, so that she would ask the girl to ask her again in 6 months, and perhaps then she would agree to take him away. Then she smiled conspiratorially and changed the subject, asking Rosalind to summon her as soon as he came to his senses. Returning to her estate, the girl sat beside the sick lad all night and watched him sleep. She brushed a strand of interfering hair out of his face and thought about the fact that 70 years ago there had been quite a few members of the species, but for some reason there had been a massive hunt for them, so they were how to number. Eleanor didn't give a reason why it happened, but said that there were rumors about some specific ability, but it turned out to be a false rumor. Eleanor didn't say what these abilities were and said that she didn't want to think about it. A new day had dawned in the manor. The girl looked displeased and asked the butler how it was a few minutes ago. He was lying without strength, and now he's made a mess all over the house and scared the servants. At this time the boy was perched on a closet. With a grin, the girl turned to the butler, wondering how it was that he was flying around the room. The butler sadly and awkwardly announced that he had brought him broth as Miss Eleanor had advised, but he gritted his teeth as soon as the man approached and didn't even look at the food. Then Rosalind asked if the butler had tried to talk to him, but he was not a year-old child and could probably speak and understand. The mother explained that he wasn't sure if the boy could talk, since when they tried to calm him down and talk to him, he would immediately start to rock, taking a firm step toward the guy sitting on the closet. The girl told him in an orderly tone to get down, but he got even more angry. It looked like he was going to attack, so the guards began to draw their way. The girl gestured for them to stop and put their swords back in their scabbards. In all seriousness, she turned to the guy and told him that she wasn't the type of person to give second chances, but given his condition and what he'd been through, she was willing to give him another opportunity. Looking toward the maids, she explained to him that these people were trying to hurt him, but just wanted to give him food. And even though Rosalind is the boss, she's not going to keep the boy's slave. Afterwards, she said she was the one who called a doctor to treat his wounds, and afterwards said that if he wanted to, he could leave as soon as he was cured, but on one condition, that he had to go downstairs and apologize to everyone. That guy continued to stare at her unhappily, with the girl wasn't about to back down either. Everyone around them was on pins and needles waiting for the boys. Next move, Hyun tiredly and went to sleep on the closet. His back turned to Rosalind. Everyone around him was shocked at his terrible manner, but remained silent. Rosalind asked the butler to continue his daily cleaning, but as punishment for his behavior, ordered him to give him no food or water until he asked for himself. Once again, she warned everyone not to feed him under any circumstances. She left, and so began their little war. The girl clearly had a headache from everything that happened in the last few days. She didn't know whether it was because the boy was too tough, or because he had a terrible temper, or because it was all of the above. But he kept making a mess, breaking furniture and tearing expensive curtains. He continued, as before, to wreak havoc every hour. The girl didn't understand where he got so much energy from. If you hadn't eaten in so long, she thought sadly, that is continued, you wouldn't be able to stay in the mansion. Rosalind was taking a walk in the mansion as she noticed a trail of blood on the floor. Then she remembered the words of the maid who had said that he had broken a flower pot and it probably stepped on the pieces, so he needed treatment now, but he wouldn't let anyone near him. Following the trail of blood, she noticed a broken window. She knew that a normal person couldn't have done it, as the windows in the mansion were made of high-quality crystal and had a magic spell on them. She didn't understand. After all, breaking the window wasn't that easy for him. If he wanted to escape, he should have just opened it. Thinking back to the guy furiously smashing around, she realized that after making such a mess, he must have spent a lot of energy. Though he still refused to eat, she remembered how one of the maids had offered him something to eat, but he had only knocked over all the food and drink, thus making them work even harder. The girl should have punished the maid for her disobedience. The girl was reading a book when a maid ran up to her and told her that the boy was missing. All this time she thought that he was hiding somewhere, and when he got hungry he would come back soon. But her assumptions were wrong, because he not only refused to eat, but did not drink anything for 4 days. Sitting on the terrace, the girl thought hard about the fact that no matter how strong he was, dehydration could affect his body, because if a person didn't drink for 4 days, serious health PR. Besides, he had only spent 4 days in the mansion, and in his condition, upon entering it was already bad. There was no telling what could happen to him. Carrying them back and suffering from a migraine, she realized that the boy was bringing far more trouble than she expected. But she couldn't leave things as they were. After all, Eleanor would be very angry at such behavior. She tried to reassure herself that she had given the boy a choice from the beginning and she could not continue to prod. Used to doing things her own way, but maid waited for Rosalind's orders. She only told her to look for him. He's probably hiding somewhere, but unfortunately after searching around the maids never found him. In the evening she noticed that 2 maids and the butler were going somewhere, taking their lanterns with the girl. Prudently warned them that if he went out into the garden you'll be hard to find at night, but they said they understood that, but they could not leave him outside the mansion. Looking at the forest, Rosalie reasoned that if he ran away and lost consciousness, we might have to expect the worst. She began to regret having thought up such a punishment. She thought that maybe she should ignore Eleanor's words and just let him go for his sake in her own. But suddenly some thought burst into her head and she ran out of the house in a flash. There were servants already calling for the boy. She walked past them and headed into the forest. And when she saw a small gaze go with a pond next to it, she stopped. She looked around for him and made sure he wasn't against Bill, but she didn't give up. She looked around and found him lying against a thick tree. The boy was unconscious. As she moved closer to him and picked him up, trying to get a good look at his face, she found that her hunch was correct. but she was glad that he was able to breathe. As she looked at the body of water, she realized he was probably thirsty and headed for the water. She guessed his location all day and couldn't see anything with the park outside the window. So he broke the window and got out running to find water and ended up going into the deepest part of the forest. The girl was angry with the boy preheated. "Drink the water," the maid offered it once. She made sure that the boy looked just awful. She didn't understand why he ran away from everyone who cared about him. She speculated that maybe he didn't want to obey people, or even in a critical situation he couldn't trust them. The girl sincerely wanted to educate him, but she didn't know. Perhaps for him insubordination was a matter of survival. Realizing that no rules of etiquette could come before his life, she realized her mistake, because education and strict measures are necessary when there is no threat to the boy's life. Taking him in her arms and covering him with her clothes, she found him to be very thin and light for his years. As she carried him back to the manor, she spoke to him as if he could hear her. Rosalind said that she didn't usually give anyone a second chance, but that she was willing to give him a third, not a second, and that he was the only one she'd ever given such a chance in her entire life. After they returned back to the manor, he opened his eyes on the evening of the second day. During this time, he had time to be bought and changed, but he climbed back up on the closet and watched the people from below. The girl kept talking to him and asking if you really like sitting on that. With their monologue was interrupted by the maid, who announced that she had brought dinner. She said it on the table, is about to leave. Then Rosalind called the boy to the table. She didn't expect him to agree, so she told him that if he didn't want to, she would eat the whole meal herself. But suddenly the boy came down from his closet. Rosalind was very surprised at this. Then he quickly snuck over to the table, whereupon he began to eat directly from his plate without using cutlery. Rawson was surprised, as she didn't think he would take even a bite, and the maid who stood behind her was glad that he had last eaten something. Then they maid, not knowing that the boy understood what she was saying, asked Rosalind if she thought the boy remembered that she had been looking after him all the time he had been unconscious. Rosalind had originally thought he was following his instincts, but after the maid's words she speculated that his sudden trust might have been due to the fact that he was eating from the hand that fed him. The girl watched contentedly and was pleased that he had at least agreed to eat something, but suddenly her impression was spoiled by a boy who climbed onto the table to continue his meal. She yelled at him and told him to sit at the table if he wanted to eat, but he quickly climbed under the blanket. The girl was glad that he was no longer refusing food, but she recognized the fact that she still had allowed to teach him. Turning to the boy, she said that she doesn't even have a husband, as in here's a little boy, whose name she doesn't even know climbed into her bed. Then, shocking the main character, he spoke. The boy said Luke 3. Watching her reaction and resting his head on her hand, he remained silent. She asked again. Then the guy explained that there were 5 hatches. The girl guessed that he meant that there was also hatch 1, hatch 2, hatch 3, but realized that was not his name but the name of some object. Then she asked again if he had another name, and also inquired what his parents had called him. The boy only replied that he did not know his parents, as he had been captured when he was very young and he had no other name, as he had never been interested in his name. The girl only said that she was now interested in the guy, admitted that's why he said it. The girl patiently explained that it didn't sound like a name since human names don't have numbers in it, but the guy gave her a serious look and informed her that he wasn't human. The girl thought deeply, but then told the boy that he would be called Fiddler from now on. The boy didn't understand why he needed a name, but Rosalind explained that he had to live with people and if he didn't like that name, he would make up his own. Then she asked him why he had suddenly decided to tell his name. He told her that it would be his payment for her bed. The girl only sarcastically said that his name comes out insanely expensive, as he can't even imagine how much money went into making her bed. The guy brushed off the bar by saying that the name wasn't the most important thing, it was more important that he was talking, smiling. The girl wondered if being able to talk to him was the feat, but the guy seriously informed her that being able to talk to him was the one thing she couldn't take away from him, and that no human had ever been able to talk to him until now. The girl interjected and then realized that since his birth, the boy had only SPO. If Eleanor was to be believed, he was at least 20 years old. He's been auctioned off countless times, either because no one bought him or because he was bought but returned afterward, because no one wants a slave who doesn't listen to his master or even talk to him. The girl decided she wasn't going to ask him about the past as it would be traumatic enough, so she diverted the topic. She warned the guy that he shouldn't get on the table again or he'd be drinking plain water instead of food. After which she stood up in front of him and informed him that this was her bed and she was just letting him sleep on for a while because he was sick. So now that he was perfectly fine, he could go to his room, but he only wrapped himself further in his blanket and turned away from her. The girl was infuriated by his behavior. At first Rosalind thought about taking and moving family to another room, but afterwards relented. She forgave him this behavior this time since he'd recently woken up. So this time he could sleep with her. Lying next to her, she found that he was already asleep. Suddenly the girl realized that she had not felt the breath of the man next to her in the same bed for a long time. After that she thought about the fact that he was about 20 years old, but forbade herself to develop this thought further because she would not get anything by such thoughts. In the end though, the boy's choice settled on the name Fendler. Perhaps it was the appearance of the name that influenced the Duchess. But the servants began to treat him as a member of the family, although there were still those who had a different opinion. The reason for the others' discontent was obvious, since the boy was still a prisoner. Of course, they could not openly express their disdain, but Friendly was very sensitive to the hostility of others. When the boy climbed back on the closet, the girl looked up and asked him why he had run away. Again, he only reported that Rosalind was acting strange, with the girl pointing informed him that there was absolutely nothing strange about wearing shoes, and conversely strange about not wearing them. The boy grudgingly reported that he had never worn shoes in his life and had a good life. The girl, looking at him unhappily, said that he had lived his whole life wrong and now it was time for him to start wearing, because if he went barefoot for 5 minutes, all his feet would turn black. She asked, "Is he really ready to go barefoot 365 days a year? Especially since it is dangerous?" The boy, looking at his feet, said not really, they were dirty. The girl sarcastically remarked that he had just bathed and they couldn't get dirty so quickly. The boy jumped off, reporting that it never bothered him. The girl put the boots down and said he should think about it and try to put them up. Fella did not move and Rosalind asked him what was the reason, but one only sadly reported that slaves could not wear shoes. Then bowing down on one knee in front of him, stopped looking down at him. She informed him that he was no longer a slave as she had burned his papers. The boy asked in shock why she had done that. His face expressed the deepest surprise when he heard that Rosalind didn't need the papers about his slavery, and after taking his foot in her hand, the girl put her shoes on him, asked him to stand up straight, and after walking he complied. Then Rosalind looked at him and asked how he was feeling. The boy embarrassingly replied that he felt a little cramped. She explained that he would have to get used to the feeling and that the most important thing was that he would not get any pain anywhere, and told him that if he wanted to live here he would have to wear shoes. The boy agreed. After that incident, Fella didn't make any more disturbances. He soon became weirdo, so he didn't run away like he used to and show hostility when he was with people. Rosalind couldn't say she didn't enjoy spending time with him. It had been a long time since she lived with someone, so she had managed to become attached to him. However, it was no secret that many people in the mansion started to avoid Fendler because they thought he looked rather bright. That's why he stays close to Rosalind. The heroine confessed that despite spending most of her time with the boy, she still couldn't figure out what's going on in his head during all the time Fender was constantly looking out the window, and that's how he spent his time, doing nothing. On one such day, Rosalie decided to ask him if he was bored sitting there. She said that if he wanted to, he could go outside and play. The boy asked with embarrassment, "Can he really go outside?" Then Rosalind repeated that he is not a slave here, not a prisoner, nor is he in confinement. He is just another resident of her state, so it was his choice to come out or not. He heard her, but still remained in his seat. She realized that it wasn't the first time you've done that. Fender usually does what he is told and necessary, but if you ask him to make a choice, he has a look of confusion on his face. So the end he does nothing. Then Rosalind decided to take the first step. She said that if he wanted to, they could walk around the estate and she could show him round. The boy was clearly intrigued by such an offer. He ran merrily through the forest while she walked quietly. Watching him, he was dating in the grass and warned that he might hurt himself. He only replied that he wasn't some little boy. The heroine recalled that under the pretense of going for walks, she began taking Fendler with her everywhere. He seemed rather lost at first, but quickly got used to it and started responding to what he was interested in. The girl remembered with attention that he was not particularly interested in brightly decorated rooms, but he liked the forests, Eden, the garden, and broad trunks very much. He liked much more small flowers in the forest or fields where there was an ornamented variety of flowers and herbs. Attracted in most of all. Watching the boy sitting surrounded by butterflies, she realized she knew absolutely nothing about his species, but assumed his love of the woods and fields was due to the fact that his ancestors had lived in large groups in such an area. It couldn't be said that all this time Fendler hadn't been doing anything, he just didn't understand. One evening they were sitting at the table and Rosalie noticed the boy's attentive gaze. He was always sitting and watching her and what she was doing. Some time passed and Fendler began to behave very strangely again. It turned out to be Eleanor's arrival. She tried to examine the boy, but he wouldn't budge. It hissed. She tried to calmly explain that she wanted to check his condition and that she was not going to hurt him. Taking it back, Rosalie realizes that another little war has begun. Eleanor had been preoccupied with the boy all this time. Turned to Rosalind and asked why it was taking so long for him to rehabilitate. She had expected that his awakening would be much sooner. She only said that there had been some difficulties, meaning the time he had been running around destroying her estate. When Eleanor tried to approach the boy, he tore past her and pushed her away. This made Rosalind very angry and she screamed, but the boy, hiding in the closet, reported that he didn't trust doctors. Eleanor informed him that she was fine and that he shouldn't scold him over such a small thing. But Rosalind didn't calm down. She told him that Eleanor was the one who had treated him, so he should stop being stubborn and come down at last. When he saw her so angry, he still decided to listen. Eleanor wondered if they had become friends, but Rosalind replied irritably. But they were not friends at all. Then finally, laying Fiddler down in the bed, Rosalind wondered if he really needed to check out the badly, since he looked healthier than anyone in the manor. Fendler only agreed with her words. Eleanor turned to Fendler and said that perhaps other doctors might be quacks, but she was not, and asked him his name. When the boy gave his name, she turned to Rosalind and wondered if that was the name she had given him. The name Fedler now bore belonged to her cat, who no longer existed. And Rosalind, grabbing yourself by the shoulders, awkwardly announced that she didn't have any normal names in her head at that moment. Eleanor then informed her that she had found a suitable place where the boy could be taken in. Rosalind was horrified that she had forgotten her own request, and the boy, sitting down on the bed, watched their conversation intently. Eleanor went on to say that if she did decide to send Fendler, they should let her know now and then they would have time to prepare. Turning away from the boy who was watching her so intently, she admitted to herself that she'd grown very accustomed and attached to him. Since he was always there for her, she'd forgotten that she hadn't intended to leave him at the manor from the beginning. The boy stared in horror, not believing it was really true. The girl only pondered that she was doing this for his own sake. Fella needs to be sent to a place where he will be better off. After all, you can't live under protection all the time. Rosalie, changing the subject, told Fendler that in such situations you should thank people because Eleanor had spent a lot of time to cure him. The boy only grudgingly muttered through his teeth that he hadn't asked for this, he hadn't asked to be treated or rescued, and he never said he wanted to go to some orphanage, nor did he want to go to this manor. He informed Rosalind not to kill herself. She thought she was doing everything for him because she's just like the crazy woman who brought high people think only of themselves with these words. He quickly ran out through the open window. Rosalind tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. Left alone with Eleanor, they discussed was worth doing. Rosalind only said that she would not run after him, pretty much return for she was not his mistress. Afterwards, she decided to rest for this conversation and giving her a headache. The girl told Eleanor the carriage had been prepared for her as she had to leave for other patients. After Eleanor had departed, Rosalie lay in her room, remembering how long he had been in her house and looking at her window. She felt the loneliness of not finding Fendler by her side. She found that with his disappearance the house had become too quiet and uncomfortable. So dressed she went into the woods, finding him in the same tree where she had found in that time he had passed out. She turned to him and asked, "Does he run away on purpose so that she will look for him?" She turned to him and asked, "Does he run away on purpose so that she will look for him?" Standing up and leaning her back against the tree, she wondered why the boy wasn't answering, but he only said angrily that he himself so that she would not look for him and asked her to leave him alone and go away. The girl only coldly replied that if he wanted her not to find him, he needed to run further outside the manor, still sitting on the branch. He said that if Rosalind wanted him out of the manor, there was no need to save it. Rosalind asked him how old he was, but he only said he had never counted. Babies can't calculate their own age, they are told by others, and so they know. But on reflection, he informed her that he was about 22 years old. Rosalind delicately inquired how he calculated that. Then he said that he had met a boy about 15 years ago. They were about the same height, so Fendler suggested that they might be the same age too. The boy was 7 years old when she heard the verb in the past tense. She assumed the captain was probably gone. Then the girl asked did he ever want to live with others like himself. And then she said that the orphanage Eleanor was talking about his many former prisoners and the boy would be much better off there. Fendler with the bored look asked, "And what happens after that?" Rosalind replied that if he was lucky he to get citizenship and go anywhere he chose, but he sadly reported that he no, as it depended on him. When suddenly the window opened, White Feather returned to the man, or the next day he indicated that he would stay here, and that's when the girl told her full name for the first time. The guy asked why do others call her Your Highness, since he thought that was her name. She said it was because of her status, but if he wanted, he could call her that too. But she was right. He never once called her Your Highness. So more time passed and Rosalind returned from her journey. The first thing she inquired about was where Friendly was now. The maid contentedly reported that he was in his room, busy reading a book. The girl was surprised that in this boy, despite his origin, there was something noble and sublime which did not fit with the image of a child in his body. He was every time such moments when she felt in him some nobility, indescribable in words. She remembered her cat, who basked in front of the fireplace on cold winter evenings. This interested look on Rosalind's face did not go unnoticed, but she would not answer his questions, for she could not say it aloud. After Feller decided to stay in the mansion, he never once expressed dissatisfaction with his new life, although they did have a fight once when their opinions differed. The boy was unhappy that he was wearing shorts instead of pants. He didn't like the fact that only little kids wear them, Rosalind said, laughing hard. That suited him very well, and that not only wear it but 10-year-old as well. The boy only reported that he was not a child at all. Then Rosalind told him in a calm tone that if he really wasn't a child he should prove it. Unexpectedly to herself she saw the guy pounce on her. He grabbed her by the neck and threw her to the floor and then threatened her, but clearly not trying to hurt her, and told her not to treat him like a child. He told her not to look down on him because of his short arms and legs. But suddenly he found the girl quickly twisting out of his grasp. And then turned the situation in her direction, and the next moment the boy was lying face down on the floor. The girl reported treating him like a child, not because of his short arms or legs. The boy just didn't realize how much power he had, after which she informed him that she was the only one doing the warning in this house, and then lowering herself to his ear so that only he could hear. She said that if he thinks because it automatically gives her a good life, he is sorely mistaken. Still, despite the boy's loss, she called the servant girl and asked her to inform the tailor that Fiddler needed to have all of his clothes altered. Also, looking at her smug sweatshirt, ordered all dirty clothes to be burned. From that day on, Fella never pounced on Rosalind again. She was glad that the matter and finally the resolved, but even so Rosalind still had a headache from the problems with Fiddler's upbringing. At first she was going to hire a professional teacher, but her high position didn't allow her to do so, as she used to be a princess of the empire and is now a duchess. Her surroundings were all there, and all the teachers she knew were also from noble families. So despite the Duchess' orders not to tell them anything, they still couldn't bear the humiliation of teaching and raising a captive. At this time the boy was looking at the book unhappily. He did not understand why he had to study. Then the girl explained that if he learned to read, he could not be tricked or forced to sign slavery papers. Watching him, she realized that it would be best to take care of his training herself, thereby not causing trouble around the situation. She had to teach the boy to write basic arithmetic, Connecticut, as well as the rules of behavior. He would need an ordinary life, but teaching all this alone would not be easy at all. Although Fowler had extraordinary abilities, he learned the alphabet and in half a day had already learned to read. It was a pleasure to teach such a quick learner. The boy was walking down the hallway when he suddenly noticed one of the servants tripping him. But he jumped over with ease, after which he turned around and inquired, "Does that one have any questions for him?" Pushing the route, serving away, the servant girl asked if he hurt himself. Afterwards she yelled at the ignorant man for the way he was behaving. He started to make excuses for not noticing the width. The girl ordered him to apologize. The guy decided to put the situation down and walked away, but then he heard them talking. The two were chatting, not expecting to be seen. The girl told the servant that if he wanted to abuse the boy so badly, he should have done it properly. Afterwards, she reproached him for not being able to do it as well. The servant only replied that he did not expect the boy to be able to dodge. The girl said that she had warned a million times that this prisoner H, and then said that she was annoyed that they had to put up with him and they did not understand the data to the Duchess in his direction. After all, this guy had absolutely no understanding of his place and behaves on equal footing with people. After all that he had heard, he turned to Rosalind and inquired how long he would be staying at the estate. He was interested because he knew that Rosalind was not going to keep him around for the rest of his life. Setting down her teacup, she informed him anytime he sought that, the one only asked when it would happen. She said that such a wish is bound to appear because there is nothing internal in the world and the boy doesn't like her enough as it is. He looked at her in surprise, not understanding why she had taken it, and then said that he had never disliked Rosalind. Silently he walked past her and left the room. The girl jumped up, about to follow. That's when the girl realized her mistake in thinking the Fendler that had been bought had become a little more changed. But it turned out that he had become that way because he had decided not to resist her anymore. She was still curious as to why he decided to stay with her, the manor, but she knew she wouldn't ask the boy that. She wondered why she couldn't ask. Perhaps it was because she couldn't anticipate his answer, or perhaps it was the thought that an unexpected answer might catch her off guard. She didn't realize which of the 2 o'clock reasons was closer. The boy went to the library and carried these books Rosalind asked him to break, but suddenly, accompanied by a guard, he was spotted by some unknown gentleman. He looked at the boy with contempt and asked him who he was, where he had never seen him before. He looked at the boy with contempt and asked who he was, for he had never seen him before. Fella didn't listen to what they were saying. He wondered who these people were. She informed him that there was a penalty for insulting royalty and that penalty was the death penalty. Bina man esti that His Majesty was aware that he had come to this house. Besides, he was still her husband since he had put his seal on the divorce paper. And besides, he was still a member of the royal family, leading a little closer to him. The girl informed him that the day she had sent him the divorce letter, their relationship had ended, so there was no point in printing it. She asked him how anyone could be so nervous to hold out any hope. Moving the sword to his hand, she informed him that iron afterward, to tell His Majesty that he loved her so much that he stamped her on the divorce paper. And I did once. Then moving the point of the sword to his thumb, Rosalind said that it would be better to cut him off now, while he was still alive, so her words would not be empty. The man recoiled in horror and told her that no matter how many threats Rosalie made, he still wouldn't divorce her. He said he tolerated everything, including when she brought her men here. He was about to say something, but she presented a sharp sword to his throat and ordered him to shut his mouth. Then she informed him that she had sent him a letter of divorce, not for the men she had slept with, but because of the absolute void in his head. Afterwards, she moved the point of her sword to his groin and said that she would deny that he didn't do a good job at night either. Then, with a smug smile, she continued. She warned that if a man ever touched anyone or anything in her house again, she would cut off no but all these other limbs and bury them in the pigsty. Rosalind looked at her ex-husband with a deep sense of content, and he, for his part, could say nothing. All he could do was to pull out with difficulties from box from the table and set it on the table with the latter, after which he fled as quickly as if he had been trying to escape. There was no need to even look at what was in it. Most likely it was a letter of divorce without a stamp part. When she turned back to the night, she spoke, trying to hide all her anger, and informed that if such an incident happened again, she would pull his sword not from its sheath but from his own throat. Afterwards, she advised that if he didn't know whether he could let a person in or not, he should ask the butler. He said that in such situations, when he didn't know what to do, he should ask someone below him, and if he wanted to continue working in her house, he would have to deal with his pride. Afterward, the girl called out to Fendler. He didn't immediately react, but seeing Rosalind's displeasure, he jumped off the table and headed towards her. They went into some kind of office where there were many flasks and test tubes, sitting him down on the table. She asked him to show her wound and was genuinely pleased that it was not deep and therefore there was no need to call a doctor. It made her angry that the knight thought it beneath his dignity to watch over his captive, and the situation became much more unpleasant. The girl threw ointment on his wound and he would have to be patient for a while. The boy tried to think of an excuse, but she said it was better this way, and taking his chin in her other hand, she pulled his face closer to hers. He studied her face intently as she dabbed his wound. He seemed to be thinking about something, but suddenly pulled out abruptly. The girl was surprised and thought that maybe he was in pain, but he said he was fine, and afterwards, not realizing his feelings, he was surprised that the boy sadly reported that he had no idea Rosalind had a husband. She only informed him that he need not worry about this person as they have not been living as spouses for a long time. The boy asked her sincerely why she had married. The girl was surprised, but calmly explained that even marriage does not guarantee eternal love, and it is not a fact that people must marry if they love each other. This is often the case among commoners, and in the royal family even more so. The boy's out unhappily with his hands folded in a lock and waited for more detailed explanation. She entered. The captives, depending on their species, lived their entire lives with only one partner. The girl then reported that she saw a lot of resentment in him. The boy only reported that he thought it a little unfair. After all, when Rosalind asked him questions without even thinking about it, he always answers, and when he is interested in something, she does not tell him anything. The girl was angry that he had kept his dissatisfaction to himself all this time, but afterwards she agreed to his terms and asked him what he wanted to know. The boy was very curious as to why Rosalind had married. And she noted that he was curious, though she was surprised that he was so interested. The boy explained that she didn't seem happy in her marriage. Then Rosaline decided to explain that he was the poorest of the matchmakers. I also said that she had chosen him. It was her mother who had chosen him for her. She thought that if she had failed man by her side, she would be smart enough to control him. The boy noticed that for a moment. The expression on Rosaline's face seemed incredibly devastated. Fendler decided to clarify what it meant to take on a mindset. Then the girl explained that her mother had always wanted her to dress brightly, wear a dress, and dance at balls. She wanted Rosalinda. Think about her and children like the other girls after imagining Rosalina dress Fendler liked the picture at first, but after that he imagined Rosaline in a dress threatening her ex-husband with a sword and it confused him. He was still very impressed by the incident. The girl went on to say that ever since she was a little girl, she had loved swords and had a predisposition for it. She was even able to defeat her brother when she was 7 and never missed a chance to show off their skills. Besides, she had power after all. She had friendly relationship with the knights. However, to her mother it turned out to be a plan to seize the throne with the help in army taking her hand. Mother said that swords would be of no use to her, so she should strive to be a good spouse. The girl, smiling, admitted that she had never been interested in the throne, for she did not like politics and afterward told family to imagine that she took the throne or ex-husband would become emperor. In that case, the empire would collapse. Rosaline said that in order to restore her reputation, she needed to divorce her ex-husband and marry someone else. But divorce was impossible because it required the emperor's permission. After all, the documents must bear his seal. But my father was on my mother's side, and her declaration that she wanted to divorce sounded to them like an intention to take the throne. And when she informed her mother that she liked someone, she only informed her to that in other words, advised her to get a lover. If Rosaline True had plans for the throne, she would have divorced her ex-husband, and married to another man with power. That powerful aristocrats would follow her, and the divorce would have been finalized later when she became empress. But in that case she would have to participate in the struggle for the throne would definitely win. She didn't want that, because if she lost she could either be exiled or killed. She won. She would have to live the rest of her life with caution. Moreover, the place of empress does not just impose serious obligations. In addition, it requires great efforts not to reveal weaknesses to enemies in constantly doubt, everyone not even trusting your closest into rich Rosa. Indent like politics because she didn't want to live that kind of life and she didn't see much point in reforming or trying to change anything there. For the way she lived now is the best option. After finishing her mental musings, the girl said that in the case of the death of the current emperors, it was possible to get a divorce without their seal. Therefore, as soon as her parents passed away, she immediately wrote a letter of divorce and sent it to her ex-husband long ago. And he's been pretty quiet all this time. And then suddenly he's out of nowhere. That's why she never thought he'd do something like this. Putting all the facts together, the girl realized that most likely her ex implicated the emperor because of personal motives. The current ruler of the empire was not on the side of his only sister, but specifically her ex-husband. He was at the same opinion as his parents and thought she was just a flighty girl who didn't want to obey her husband, and the ex-husband in his eyes looked like a poor husband who had a hard time because of his selfish, rude wife. Turning to the boy, she asked why he had come to her and suggested running away. Smiling, she asked, did the one wanted to protect her from her ex-husband? His whole face reddened with embarrassment. He didn't know what to say to that. He couldn't articulate his thought properly, but remembering his past, informed that those who break into a house like that can't have good intentions. Then the girl replied with a smile that those who would want to harm her don't usually come in through the front door. They either climb over the fence, break windows, or sneak poison into her food. The boy stared anxiously. Is there someone else who wants to harm Rosaline? Then the girl explained that if such a person appeared, he would most likely do exactly as she suggested. But even in the event that something happens, "Sir, he may not worry for his life." Touching his hand that was resting on her lap, she promised that she would take care of his safety so he might not have to worry about anything happening to him. After all, they wouldn't touch the boy as it would be illogical they kidnapped him, while the boy angrily tried to explain that he wasn't worried about himself, but the girl thought he was reacting to her words because he didn't believe her. So she reiterated that she wasn't joking and that if someone broke into their house to hurt her, he shouldn't try to protect her. It would be better to go hide somewhere, climb a tree or under a bed or anywhere else he could hide. The boy listened to this sadly, and didn't realize what he could say. He wanted to explain that he was worried about at this time. The girl further developed her thought that in the event of an attack he would need to wait until it was over, and in the event that she died, he needed to go elsewhere. She suggested he run to Maureen because she had nothing to do with that girl and their connection to Eleanor had long been known to all. The boy got angry and jumped off the table. Fendler said he could stand up for himself and promised he could stand up for her, among other things, but the girl told him with Syria as many as 4 times and he could not stand up for himself, but she recognized his agility and speed. However, even her ex-husband had managed to hit him so he wouldn't be able to defend anyone. She immediately wondered if she had overreacted and said something stupid, but still went on reassuring him that weakness was not something to be ashamed of and he could just let others protect him. The boy didn't say anything, just started to leave the room saying he was going to collect the scattered, and with a loud angry slam of the door he left, and the girl with the bored and amazed looked at not understand whether this boy who really be 20 years old, because judging by his behavior, he is still a child. Stepping out into the hallway and alone with himself, he looked at his hands. He had always disliked the fact that he still hadn't grown up. However, something had clearly changed since he's been in the mansion. Remembering Rosalind, he promised that if her ex-husband came here again, he would make Rosalind regret her words and he wouldn't just tolerate or hide. It is not known how much time has passed since that conversation, but Rosalind decided to go to town and took Fendler with her. Since they spent all their time together, the boy felt insecure being surrounded by so many strangers and was constantly adjusting his hat. Rosalind saw this, so to distract him she suggested that he choose where they should go. Looking at the bottle boy, she realized that since Lucian, her ex-husband, had made a mess of the estate, neither Rosalind or Fender had ever mentioned his name. Luigi, who almost had his finger cut off, never showed up again. And Fendler would. Selva surely expected him to come for various reasons, ended up having to forget about it all because of his studies. One day, while she was tutoring the boy, Rosalind gave him a tiny piece of paper and asked him to memorize the contents. It turned out to be Maureen's address. Maureen was one of the few, had been a prisoner in the past, but had been granted citizenship. She ran an orphanage where she held other captives who had nowhere to go. When Rosalind saw the boy looking sadly at a piece of paper, she asked him if he could read addresses. Fendler, taking her question literally, read what was written. But the girl said she meant something else and explained that she was asking if he could find an address, finding him silent. She suggested that they go into town together, as she was going into the cane store anyway. Afterward, she said the boy should see for himself where Maureen's house was. Fendler clearly didn't like this conversation. Asked if it was imperative that he needed to know this information. She saw the looming tension between them, but afterward informed him that he would be better off when he had another safe haven, and afterward added a safe haven wasn't easy to find leading back in his. Sharon looking at the girl, the boy informed her that everyone in town would be looking at his ears and tail. Rosalind only explained that as long as Fiddler was with her, there would be no problems. Besides, there are many former captives in the city, have been granted citizenship and live like normal people. But realizing that the boy was just trying to find an excuse not to go with the orphanage, she informed him that Fendler would still have to remember where he was. Rosalind understood that so she asked him if he wanted to explain something bigger, but Bender refused and walked confidently towards the girl. Rosalind was Saturday. The boy didn't argue again and just did as he was asked, but for some reason she was not happy about it at all. But what is to come? Will Rosalind continue to support this beast boy? Will he become her mystery beast slave turned lover? Will he realize his strange feelings to her? Comment Beast Boy below for part 2, and why not check out this epic recommendation, Crazy Princess Who Fakes Her Madness to Avoid Execution.